So, I want you to imagine sitting in your living room on a quiet Sunday morning.
Okay, sounds nice.
Right. The house is completely still. You've got the coffee brewing.
Yeah.
There are no deadlines, no emails, no traffic.
Just total peace.
Exactly. To you, that silence probably feels like a luxury. It's relaxing. But what if, instead of feeling relaxed, your nervous system just started screaming at you that you were about to die?
Wow. Yeah, that's a terrifying thought.
I mean, what if that profound quiet wasn't a signal of safety at all, but the ultimate warning that an invisible threat was closing in?
It just completely inverts how we understand human comfort.
Yeah.
Because, we're so conditioned to believe that removing stress equals relaxation.
Right.
But if a brain has been subjected to enough specific targeted environmental conditioning, removing the noise actually triggers the deepest levels of panic.
Well, welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are exploring the terrifying architecture of exactly that kind of mind.
It's a really intense topic today.
It is. We are pulling from a fascinating structural choice in our source material, the Tularosa Perimeter, a forensic reconstruction. And up until now, in this deep dive, we've been following the subject, Alexander Thorne.
Right, following his post-military life.
Yeah, as he struggles through it, we've seen him burning out in pizza kitchens, and we've watched his eventual total retreat into a fortified house in New Mexico, hiding behind a literal 15-mile limit.
And we've basically been looking at the end result so far, the severe agoraphobia, the isolation, the panic architecture he built around himself.
But the narrative does something super jarring in part 6 of the text. It's this massive structural fracture.
It really is.
The section is literally titled Back to the Beginning, and the source material just yanks us backward in time all the way to chapter 13.
Because the author realizes that to understand the broken man in the desert, we can't just look at his symptoms.
We have to look at the exact recipe that rewired his nervous system to view peace and quiet as a mortal threat.
Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we actually land when the timeline violently rewinds?
So we drop into February 1993 at a railhead in Erlangen, Germany. Thorne is a cherry, which is military slang for a brand new arrival straight out of training.
Just new kid.
Exactly. He has just been assigned to the 16th Engineer Battalion, a unit known as the Catamounts. And the author deliberately avoids starting with some profound philosophical musing. Instead, we are slammed into an extreme physical and sensory baseline.
I mean, the sensory details here are just overwhelming. The text describes a freezing German winter wind cutting right through their standard-issue Gore-Tex gear.
Yeah, it sounds miserable.
But the cold feels secondary to the sheer concussive noise of what they're actually doing.
Right, because they're conducting a rail load. Thorne and his unit are chaining M113 armored personnel carriers down onto Deutsche Bahn slat cars.
And for anyone listening who isn't familiar with armored vehicles, an M113 isn't just a heavy truck.
Oh no, not at all. It's essentially a 60-ton aluminum armored box on steel tracks. I was trying to picture the sheer industrial violence of that sound, 'cause steel vehicle tracks grinding against steel train cars.
Yeah. Heavy iron chains being whipped and ratcheted down, diesel engines just screaming.
And layered over that deafening and mechanical screech, you have the human element.
Right. Thorne has a staff sergeant named Miller looming over him, and Miller is physically screaming into Thorne's ear over the engines, warning him that they are heading to the box.
The box. That's Hohenfels, right? The massive training area.
That's right. Hohenfels is where units go to fight opposing forces, the OPFOR, in highly realistic, grueling combat simulations.
And Sergeant Miller is making the stakes crystal clear to this new kid.
Oh, absolutely. He tells Thorne that if he screws up the logistics here on the railhead, if a chain slips or a measurement is off, he dies out there in the mud.
Let's just try to put that into perspective for a second. It's like trying to defuse a complex explosive device while standing in the front row of a heavy metal concert.
In a freezing wind tunnel.
Yes, in a freezing wind tunnel. And your boss is standing over your shoulder shouting that if you hesitate for a second, everyone in the room gets crushed. I mean, it forces the brain to completely decouple focus from comfort.
And that is the crucial mechanism. What's fascinating here is how this establishes a dangerous neurological baseline for a young soldier.
How so?
Well, we talk about the amygdala, right? The brain's threat detection center. Under these conditions, the brain is flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. But Thorne isn't allowed to panic or run away.
No, he has to do his job.
He has to perform complex, high-stakes tasks perfectly. So his brain adapts. It begins to associate high-decibel, high-stakes chaos with normalcy.
Wow.
It wires itself to believe that peak efficiency and survival are only possible when the environment is turned up to a maximum sensory overload.
So we have a brain that is literally being hot-wired for 115 decibels of chaos.
Exactly.
But the human body can't sustain that indefinitely. When the training ends, the noise stops. But the nervous system is still redlining.
It's still waiting for the next threat.
And we see exactly how dangerous that drop-off is when the narrative jumps forward slightly to March 1994 in the town of Bamberg.
Right. Thorne is a private first class now. He's already done a brief deployment to Saudi Arabia, and the peacetime army rhythm has firmly set in.
That cycle of extremes.
Yeah, garrison, train, garrison, train. You spend 3 weeks sleeping in the freezing mud of an armored vehicle, and then you are thrust back into civilian spaces for the weekend, and you're just expected to casually decompress.
Which takes us to a smoky pub off Zollnerstrasse. Thorne is drinking these heavy, golden Hefeweizens, and he meets a local university student named Sabine.
Sabine is such a great character.
She is. She's an outsider, but she is incredibly observant. She notes how loud American soldiers generally are, but then she zeroes in on Thorne's specific, deliberate drinking habits.
She really sees right through him.
She watches him and says this haunting line. She says, "You drink to forget the mud, but you also drink to forget the silence."
It's a brilliant, penetrating observation. Sabine sees the structural cracks forming in his psyche before he even realizes they are there.
Yeah.
She recognizes that the alcohol isn't a social lubricant for him, it's an anesthetic. And Thorne's response to her is deeply chilling.
He doesn't deny it at all.
No, he just looks at her and says, "Quiet means ambush."
I really want to dig into that specific phrase because it highlights that inversion of comfort we talked about at the top of the show.
Yeah.
Walk me through the mechanics of that fear. I mean, why does peace inherently feel like a trap to him?
Well, to understand that, you have to look at how a combat engineer is trained to perceive the world. Their whole job is to anticipate hidden threats.
Right. Mines, wire obstacles, rigged artillery shells.
Exactly. In a combat zone, or even a hyper-realistic training environment like Hohenfels, noise is information.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you hear the diesel engines of your convoy, you know where your support is. If you hear outgoing artillery, you know the battle rhythm. Noise means the variables are accounted for.
But if everything suddenly goes dead silent?
Then the variables are hidden. A void in sound means the enemy is maneuvering. It means you've lost contact. It means you've walked into a kill zone and the trap is about to spring.
So silence is actually dangerous.
Silence is the space where the unknown lives. And for a mind that is constantly calculating fields of fire and scanning for tripwires, the unknown triggers an immediate, unmanageable fight-or-flight response.
That perfectly explains a physical symptom that dominates his life decades later. The source material spends a lot of time describing this cicada-like shriek in his head, the tinnitus.
Yes, absolutely. When the external world finally goes silent, his nervous system just can't handle the void. So it literally manufactures its own noise.
It's essentially phantom limb syndrome, but for his hearing.
That's a great way to put it.
His brain is trying to use a threat detection muscle that isn't receiving any input, so it hallucinates a 115 decibel scream just to feel secure. It manufactures chaos, because chaos is the only state where his nervous system feels alert enough to survive.
And the tragic irony here is that for a long time, the military structure actually rewards this hypervigilance.
How so?
Well, the narrative shows us how the institution masked his unraveling. By September 1994, on paper, Alexander Thorne is an absolute success story. His company commander, Captain Richards, promotes him early to Specialist E4.
For those not familiar with the rank structure, that's the sham shield, right?
Yes, the specialist rank. It's a unique position. You are still lower enlisted, but you are expected to carry immense technical proficiency and shoulder leadership responsibilities without the official authority of a sergeant.
And Thorne is just excelling at this.
Oh, completely. He's maxing out his physical training score at a 290. He operates his heavy vehicles flawlessly. The institution looks at him and sees a highly tuned instrument.
He feels invincible. But here's where it gets really interesting. The author makes a brilliant narrative choice right at this moment of peak success.
The structural break.
Yeah, the timeline fractures again.
Right.
The text deliberately jumps entirely over the actual trauma of his deployment to the Balkans. It skips December 1995 completely.
And that omission is so powerful, the author skips the terrifying crossing of the swollen Sava River in Bosnia.
And we should clarify what that crossing entailed. Thorne was driving a 60-ton armored vehicle over a temporary floating pontoon bridge in a known combat zone,
Just waiting.
effectively waiting for a submerged mine to detonate and shatter his spine. It is pure, prolonged psychological torture, but the author just steps right over it.
Because the author wants us to focus on the structural damage, not the spectacle of the event itself. By skipping the trauma and landing us in June 1996, the contrast is maximized.
We jump right to the aftermath.
Exactly. Thorne is now back in Bamberg. He's been transferred to the 82nd Engineer Battalion, known as the Blue Babe.
And the change in him is profound. He's a seasoned specialist now, which means he finally gets his own private room in the barracks. No more open bays, no more roommates.
But instead of enjoying that hard-earned privacy, what do we find him doing?
He's sitting alone in the dark, staring at the wall, drinking Jack Daniels.
The hypervigilance has fully taken over. He can't turn it off, so he's using the alcohol to manually force his nervous system to downregulate.
There's a scene here that really captures the tragedy of it. A bartender named Katja, a woman he was supposed to take on a date to a local fest, shows up at his barracks room.
Because he completely stood her up.
Right. She knocks on his door, finds him sitting in the dark with a whiskey. And she identifies this fundamental shift in his humanity. She tells him, since you came back from the Balkans, you are static, you are here, but you are not here.
A static ghost.
Yeah.
It is the perfect distillation of the freeze response. We always talk about fight or flight, but freeze is the third, often most devastating biological reaction to trauma.
He's just stuck.
He can't fight the silence in his room, and he can't run away from his own memories, so he just freezes. His heart rate is probably elevated, his muscles are tense, his brain is scanning for threats, but his physical body is completely still in the dark.
The physical organism survived the Sava River crossing. The body made it back to Germany. But the core of his presence is still sitting on that pontoon bridge, waiting for the explosion.
And what the text is illustrating so masterfully here is how the military's high operational tempo was acting like a vice.
Squeezing him.
Yeah, the constant deployments, the grueling training cycles, the rigid ranks. That structure provided a tight container for his chaos. It gave his hypervigilance a productive outlet. But internally, the spring was warping. The tension was building with nowhere to go.
And you can only wind a warp spring so much before the metal finally snaps. Which brings us to the ultimate consequence of this temporal jump in Chapter 13. We finally arrive at the exact moment Thorne breaks away from the institution that built him.
We move forward to November 1997. Thorne has just returned from his second tour in Bosnia, known as SFOR2, or the Stabilization Force.
And this is the deployment where the psychological container finally shatters.
Yes. The text details an incident near McGovern Base. Thorne witnessed a civilian step on a landmine.
The text refers to it as the Red Mist incident. And I think we need to pause and give that moment the weight it demands.
Definitely.
This isn't a movie explosion. Thorne is watching the actual unforgiving physics of an explosive shockwave dismantle a human being right in front of him.
It's horrifying.
It's the sudden, violent erasure of a life, reduced to a pink cloud in the air. The profound helplessness of witnessing that, especially as a combat engineer whose entire job is supposed to be clearing those hazards, it completely breaks his understanding of safety.
It proves to him definitively that the world is inherently lethal and unpredictable. And when we see him back in Bamberg after this deployment, the internal damage is fully externalized.
He is at the Seven Hills Club. The environment around him is just standard garrison town noise.
Yeah.
Young privates are laughing, drinking, telling stories about basic training.
But Thorne is entirely disconnected from it. The text notes that his hands are physically vibrating against the table.
His nervous system is trapped in a loop.
Yes, dumping adrenaline into his bloodstream, and he can't burn it off.
And right at this moment of maximum internal crisis, the military tries to pull him back into the machinery. A new lieutenant approaches his table.
The lieutenant recognizes Thorne as the battalion's foremost expert on the Panther tank, and he asks him to run a training clinic on the mine rollers for the new guys the following week.
Let's clarify what the Panther tank is, because the mechanics of that vehicle really mirror Thorne's mental state. It's not a standard tank you ride inside of, is it?
No, it's a deeply isolating piece of machinery. The Panther is a modified 40-ton tank chassis equipped with massive steel rollers designed to detonate landmines.
Okay.
But here is the key detail. It is operated by remote control. The operator stands outside the vehicle, sometimes at a significant distance, manipulating a control box while the machine rolls forward to absorb the explosive blasts.
So the expert of this machine is literally trained to stand back, completely detached, watching a surrogate absorb the violence.
Exactly.
It's the ultimate physical manifestation of being a static ghost. But when the lieutenant asks him to teach this clinic, Thorne doesn't say yes. He doesn't even stand up to address the officer.
He just looks at him and delivers a definitive, defiant refusal. He says, "I'm done, sir. I'm clearing my own lanes now."
The lieutenant tries to reprimand him for his tone, but Thorne is already gone. He finishes his beer, walks out into the cold German night, gets into his beat-up BMW, and drives away.
"I'm clearing my own lanes now."
I got chills reading that line. It's a combat engineer's core doctrine, repurposed for total isolation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of the entire book, this is the watershed moment. An engineer clears a lane through a minefield specifically so that the unit can follow behind them safely.
It's about the team.
It is an act of service and shared risk. By telling the officer he is clearing his own lanes, Thorne is formally severing his social contract with humanity.
Wow.
He is stating that he is no longer operating for the benefit of others, and he no longer expects anyone to cover his back.
I mean, imagine what that realization feels like. Imagine coming to the terrifying conclusion that the massive, powerful institution that built your entire identity, the structure that taught you how to survive, can no longer protect you from the reality of your own memories.
The military container has failed him.
Yeah.
Because the shared reality of the army, the ranks, the camaraderie, the belief in the mission, it relies on a collective agreement.
Right. Everyone has to buy into it.
Exactly. Thorne can no longer participate in that agreement because his internal reality has been permanently altered by the Red Mist incident. He knows the truth of the void.
So rejecting that order isn't just insubordination.
No, it is him retreating into a one-man perimeter. That cold night outside the Seven Hills Club is the exact moment the 15-mile limit we see decades later in the desert is born.
We've spent this time tracing the jagged white line on the X-ray, and here we see the bone finally snap. If we pull all these pieces together, we see the exact forensic recipe for the trauma we witness at the start of the book.
We really do.
You take a young, malleable brain. You subject it to deafening, high-stakes industrial chaos until it links panic with survival. You teach that brain that silence is a void where death hides. You reward its hypervigilance. And then you drop it into a literal minefield to watch physics dismantle humanity.
It forces us to realize that trauma isn't just a bad memory. It is a systematic physiological rewiring of the human animal.
It's biological.
Right. The author pulled us back to chapter 13 because if we only saw the man hiding in the desert, we might just think he was crazy. But by showing us the assembly line of his trauma, we see that his reaction is actually perfectly logical.
It makes complete sense.
His mind was built to survive a war, which made it entirely incompatible with peace.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? Obviously, most of us aren't chaining 60-ton armored vehicles to flat cars in freezing weather, and we aren't crossing mined rivers.
Hopefully not.
Right. But we all operate within environments that set our baselines. Maybe it's a toxic, high-churn corporate culture that demands you answer emails at 2 a.m. Maybe it's a chaotic family dynamic where you constantly have to manage other people's emotional explosions.
We adapt to our environments just like Thorne did. Our nervous systems adjust to the noise and the pressure. We associate that stress with our own competence and survival.
And often, we don't realize how toxic that baseline has become until the environment changes, until the deadline passes or the toxic relationship ends and things finally get quiet.
That's when it hits you.
That's when the crash happens. That's when you find yourself sitting in your own version of a dark room, feeling like a static ghost, unable to downregulate your own heart rate.
Which leaves us with a critical question to consider about our own modern lives. We've seen how extreme conditioning caused a man to fear the silence. But on a smaller scale, we all avoid the quiet.
Oh, absolutely.
We constantly reach for our phones, we leave the television running in the background, we overschedule our weekends.
We all have our own version of the cicadas.
Exactly. If silence is the empty space where our unresolved fears, our stress, and our exhaustion finally have room to catch up with us, what kind of noise are you manufacturing in your own life to keep the silence at bay?
Something to seriously think about the next time you find yourself alone, in a quiet room, reaching for a distraction. Let the silence happen. See what it's trying to tell you. Until next time, keep digging deeper.